All right, let's get right into it. We're going to start with a pinpoint of a time period, which is the Santorini volcanic eruption, roughly 1600 BC. This starts Moses' miracles and the end of Exodus when the people are getting out of Egypt. And now, 400 years earlier, because the people were afflicted for 400 years, we'll go to 2000 BC. This is when the new pharaoh does not know Joseph. We'll fast forward now to 2050 BC. This is the start of the war Mentuhotep against the Lower Kingdom, which is northern Egypt. A regime of Egyptian nationalists conquers Lower Egypt, preserving the Egyptian identity and dominance. So the Egypt was being fractioned into many cultures apparently at the time, where many kings were trying to vie for power, and so one had to rise, and that was Mentuhotep, and he conquered the land. 430 years before that, the beginning of the sojourning period, this is the death of Joseph. Right after he died, the people were sojourning. We're going to fast forward a bit to Joseph's beginning, his birth. After 30 years of age, he was under the vizier of Doger and helped create the step pyramid. May not have been part of the Giza pyramid, but we're going to throw that out there. He could have actually helped with the Giza pyramid, being that it was created during his lifespan, if these dates are accurate. Now, let's get into who Imhotep was. These are his attributes. He was a vizier, a physician, he had authority, he saved them from a famine. He lived in Lower Egypt, which is the northern part at the end of the Nile. He was a dreamer. He was a top religious priest, and they never found his tomb. So we'll take a look at what Joseph did. He became Pharaoh's advisor, the first vizier of Egypt. And yes, Joseph in fact directs a group of physicians in the process of embalming. He gets Pharaoh's signet ring, which allows him to send mail, create laws, make allies. He can do anything as his Pharaoh because he can just stamp the envelope. He navigates the 7 year famine. That's what he's known for, one of the most um, prominent things that Joseph did in the Bible. And of course, he lives in Goshen, which is northern Egypt on the east side of the Nile. One of the first stops you would make if you were walking in from Israel. And of course, Joseph was a dreamer. He interpreted three dreams in his life: one of his brothers, one of his two cellmates, and of course, the one that saves the land from the famine. Now, being the son of the steward of the Bible, I'm going to put that he had access to paper, possibly, or even knowledge of the scripture, which there was no possible scripture, but he had knowledge of whatever they were folklore handing down, being that he was a prominent character in the Bible. So I'm going to give him religious intelligence as well. He knew two languages, Hebrew and Egyptian. Before he left, he was probably about 7 years old. I want to say, I don't know, maybe 10. So he knew some stuff before he left off to Egypt. And finally, his tomb was lost, and Moses, in fact, leaves with the bones in Exodus. So before the Israelites pack up out of Egypt, Moses scoops up Joseph's bones. So that's why Imhotep's bones have never been found. The tomb is lost. So let's get into some math. If 70 families become 600,000 in 830 years, that would mean the compounded rate would approximately be 1.138% increase per year. That means every year one, there's 100 people. Year two, there's 101. Year three, there's 103. Year four is 105, probably. I don't know. But, it's like going up a little bit. But the thing is, the highest known rate was only 0.38 before the industrial age. Once the industrial age technology allowed us to be better at navigating Earth, then you can see the birth rates begin to rise. But before then, 0.38. So 0.38 versus 1.1 is almost three times as high. So If we say that they were there for 830 years, they would need triple the highest known growth rate of their era. Triple the highest known growth rate ever to even make it that far that fast. It's crazy high, but not undoable. Not not undoable. Um, just to put it in perspective, Egypt most likely had a growth rate about 0.2%. So that means if there's 1,000 people in an area, they would have two births per year, increasing by 2 people per year. Um, and that was the average growth rate globally. Everyone pretty much had zero point 0.2 globally. So even the highest known was double at 0.38, almost double. And then having the people of Egypt rated tracking it going even faster than that, faster than double, 3 times double, which is still, because today's growth rate is 2 to 4% annually. So we're going faster than that annually in today's number. So it's not like impossible, but for that time period, it would be, it seems like it should be impossible. Well, was it 830 years? Let's take a look. Genesis 47:27 implies that they were owning their own land. They had their own possessions and their own land. So, being that they had their own land, then they had their own identity and kingdom allied with Egypt. Maybe they were just paying taxes to Egypt, but they still had, you know, their own neighborhood and police force, things like that. And then we look at Exodus 12:40. This is 2060 BC, 2040 BC. Mentuhotep is threatened by the growth rate of the Israelites, so he has to subjugate them. He has to put them in bondage. And this is beginning the 30-year conquest of Mentuhotep II to conquer Lower Egypt, subjugate him, and the Hyksos War. And then, of course, Genesis had already foretold that they would have 400 years of affliction. And then 430 years from the exact day that Mentuhotep II claimed all of Israel's land and identity in Goshen as part of a unified Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, why would the Bible say to the exact day? And why would it be there? Well, the reason why is because this was like the Egyptian Independence Day, the day that Mentuhotep took over all of Egypt, conquered all the lands, brought um, a new identity to the people that they were black or Cushite. Um, Goshen was conquered. All these things are happening, and there's the Egyptian holiday of this particular day. Well, 430 years later, the miracles of Exodus are happening, and it lines up to at the end be close to that day or on that day. And why not? If this is the day that we claim our independence, why not give your people their independence that they've been wanting on that day as well? So this is right here. So that's why it's so significant and interesting that it pinpoints the exact day, because it never. I don't think it ever does that ever in the Bible. It never ever says this is the exact day that that happened 400 years ago on the exact day again. Is because it was tracked by Egypt, and they knew the exact date was their Independence Day because they would celebrate it probably every year. But now some people would argue it was not 830 years; it was actually 430 years, which you could say um, that they were there a total of 430 years, which would kind of be hard to have a great person that saves your empire for 7 years, and then he's alive for another 80 years, and then so he saves you, he's alive for 80 years governing the land, and then you forget in 30 years till we got to go to war on the people. That don't seem right. That's like almost one generation. The influence would, I feel like the influence would have still been there. So I really don't think 430 years is enough time. 30 years, theoretically 30 years out of that 430 be Mentuhotep's conquering, or the pharaoh conquering them for 30 years and then put him in bondage for 400 right after Joseph died. Doesn't make sense. So what I'm going to say is Genesis 47:27 equals X. X implied, owning their own land. It could be, it's just a time period. It's just a period of time that is not stated specifically. So this whole time of them owning their land and setting up shop is in growing, because they have to grow to the point where they threaten Egypt, which I think had about a million, couple million people around that time, million to 2 million during the period. So they had to get enough hundreds to thousands to be like, all right, this is a threat. You know what I'm saying? So that period of time from them going from 70 to a threat is X. Then, of course, we'll just put this area here, 430 years, 30-year conquest, of him being suspicious to him conquering. And so we'll leave it at X plus 430 years is the amount of time. I don't know. Maybe my math is off here again, because he doesn't he doesn't conquer the day he gets suspicious. You know. So for the sake of inaccuracy of all areas, the Egyptian timeline's off. The wording here, Genesis 47:27 can imply 500 years, 300 years, 700 years. It's just a time period that we don't know. We can only track it by how fast the people were growing. And so I'm just going to leave it at 830 years just for the sake of mathematics and just to have a point of reference. As you can see, the chart shows almost 1,000 years, but 830 is pretty close to that, about 950, something like that. Now, one thing we want to take consideration in the Bible, especially the NIV version, is that the nows. Any verse that begins with now is telling you that it's setting a new time and date, a new whole setting. You know, now I'm graduating elementary school, and then I went and fought a bully. Now I'm getting married. You know, it'll just say it like that, like now, new time period. So we have to really focus on the nows because we're trying to figure out dating. So we need to be specific. And it took me a while to comb through the wording to find this, but the Lord has blessed us. Exodus 1:1, 70 individual people or households arriving in Egypt. Joseph was still in command. So this is from 2600 to the 80 years to 2520 estimated. This is the 80 years that Joseph was had the signet ring, and he was like the wisest person in Egypt for almost 100 years. And then Exodus 2, enough time has passed for Pharaoh to forget Joseph was Imhotep, or forget that Joseph was not an Egyptian, forget that Imhotep was not an Egyptian. It took almost 500 years for them to forget that the builder of the step pyramid was not Egyptian. This seems a little more logical of a time period for someone to forget history and repeat history. Well, not repeat it, but forget history and then act as if it never existed. Several generations, 5, 10 generations, enough time for many factions to have split and people vying for power at this time. Mentuhotep conquers the land. But if you look at the now, that's one verse, one verse, 500 years in between. That's exactly how the Bible works. When you read it, you could have skimmed right past that and not realize it just transitioned 500 years from 70 people to a lot of people. And then finally, the final now is in Exodus 6:13 to 25. This indicates a passage of time that changed individual people into clans under the name of Jacob's grandchildren. 1600 BC. This is roughly right before they're about to get out. So another time period in 5 chapters of 400 years the whole time. What happened was the Jacob's grandchildren went on to be pretty much famous. So 70 people and their names, probably 10 of them, 10 special names out of the 70, they created clans. They didn't create the clans, it's just their children clung to the names. Were like, yo, we are children of, Joseph. We are children of Manasseh, Ephraim. We are the Ephraim. They took those names, Kohanites, for Koah. Uh, they they took those names and created clans of thousands of people. These are the children of those clans. And in each clan, there is a head of the household or the leader of a clan. And these leaders of the clans were the ones that were named in the Bible here in Exodus 6:13 to 25. These were the leaders of the clans, but not necessarily father son descendant of Jacob's grandchildren. I think this is where people get it mixed up. They think that these people listed are the next generation behind Jacob's grandchildren, when really Jacob's grandchildren become fantasized or romanticized, and then they're turned into these larger than life last names, you know, that create a whole tribe of people that are under these last names. So that's where the break is. So this is 1600 BC. And this pretty much concludes what I had to say here. The main thing was getting the dates together, and Exodus 6:13 to 25 indicates a huge passage of time between the people arriving and the people having 600,000 children split into groups under the tribal names. And I believe at the end of Exodus, it also talks about how those groups, each according to their thousands, how they were split. But if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. It's our first video on the channel, Biblical Science. And this is for my peers out there, all of you watching. If you have any objections, corrections, suggestions, or anything, let me know. And the final thing is here, as you can see, the name Joseph. It has the same phonetic meaning as OF, Imhotep, and then also in some languages like Spanish, the J sound makes the ho, so it's Hosef or Hotep. And then also in some African cultures, like Mbutu, the M is silent, so it's Mbutu. Mbutu is it's not really silent, but it's like a breath. So it's Mbutu or Isulu, like the Zulu. It's actually Isulu with an I. So Imhotep, I believe, was more likely pronounced Motep, Mhotep. And the J in Joseph could be Joseph. Once again, here's a look at the charts, the dates, what was happening, everything lined up, the foundation. Yeah, that concludes the video. Everybody take care.